Welcome back to The Deep Dive, the show where we take a stack of source materials, a topic you might encounter every day, and transform it into the ultimate cheat sheet for genuine fluency and being truly well-informed.
And today we are diving into something pretty much universal.
It really is. It's something almost everyone does, whether they love it, loathe it, or, just endure it. We're talking about the daily trip.
We are focusing intensely on the commute, and specifically how mastering the language around this routine can just supercharge your English conversation skills.
That is precisely our mission today.
It is. We've analyzed materials focused heavily on practical, conversational English. I mean, not the kind of stuff you find in old textbooks. We're pulling out the nuanced vocabulary.
Good essential phrases.
And critically, the tricky grammatical insights.
Yeah.
Our goal is simple: to allow you, our listener, to discuss your daily journey, your commute, with absolute confidence.
And with natural ease, right. Not sounding like a robot.
Exactly. Conversational depth. We want to lift the discussion beyond just I go to work into real, engaging storytelling.
Okay, so let's unpack that idea. Commuting. When you first think about it, it seems so functional. Almost boring, maybe.
Yeah, a bit. How did you get here?
Right. But actually, if you look closer, it is a goldmine of language practice. It forces you to cover routines, so you're using the present tense. Then you have to recount past events, delays, the drama, so that brings in narrative tenses.
And expressing personal feelings, discussing logistics.
Yeah.
It's all there.
Exactly. Everyone has a commute story, which makes it incredibly rich ground for genuine conversation.
It connects us, doesn't it? And to anchor this entire deep dive, we really need to solidify our understanding of the core term itself.
Which is?
Commute. It's pronounced kesjist.
Just.
And this word is key because it doesn't just mean any old trip. It specifically refers to the regular journey, that predictable route between your home and your place of work or school.
So the regularity is the important part.
It implies a consistent back and forth movement, which is why it links so perfectly to the idea of a daily routine.
That's a really important distinction. It's the difference between saying, I went to the dentist yesterday, which is, a single event.
Right, a one-off.
And saying, I commute to the city center every day, which is basically a lifestyle.
It is. And our goal is to equip you to weave in all those details: the mode of transport, the duration, the stress, the enjoyment, the unexpected delay.
Which is what truly makes English sound fluid and conversational. It moves you so much closer to fluency.
And we're going to make sure that by the end of this deep dive, you can navigate all of those conversational waters with total ease.
All right, let's start at the beginning of the journey, where every commute conversation begins. Just describing the routine.
Okay. So we are anchored here in the present simple tense. We're focusing on the actions that happen most days, the things that are generally true.
And the sources gave us this beautiful foundational template that you can just pick up and use immediately.
They did. That template is really the backbone of the whole conversation. I usually take the mode of transport to work school.
Simple. And it sounds completely natural.
Perfectly natural. And that verb take is absolutely critical here. It is the most common verb we use when we talk about using public or shared transport for our regular journey.
So to make that template work, we first need to nail the modes of transport. The sources highlight the main contenders.
Right. So for public transport, you've got the reliable bus.
The train, which I guess often means the bigger overground commuter rail.
And then you have the rapid transit options like the subway.
Okay, the subway. And of course, that has other names in other places.
It does. And remember, for those outside North America, subway might be called the underground, particularly if you're in London.
The tube.
The tube, exactly. Or the metro in many European cities. But honestly, subway is so globally recognized now that it's pretty much universally understood in English conversations.
So the key thing is knowing that you take them. I take the bus, I take the subway.
That's the consistency. I take the train.
Okay. Then we have the personal options. You've got the bike and the car.
Right. And here there's a slight change. While I take my car is grammatically okay. It's fine.
It sounds a little clunky to me.
It does. More often when we talk about personal vehicles, we swap the verb. We'd say, I drive my car, or I ride my bike.
That sounds much more natural.
The key is just being able to use those verbs fluidly.
Okay, so you've said how you travel. What's the next logical piece of information?
The duration. After stating the mode, the very next thing an English speaker typically provides is how long it takes.
And there's a specific structure for this, isn't there?
A very precise and easy to master structure.
Yeah.
It takes me about duration minute hours, for instance. I drive my car to the city. It takes me about 45 minutes.
It takes me. That structure is simple, it's active, and it avoids any awkward translations from other languages.
It really does. It's just the standard way to express the length of your journey, whether it's 2 minutes or 2 hours. My advice is don't use complicated verb pairings here. Simplicity is your friend.
Okay. But here's where we need to elevate the conversation, right? We need to move it from just being informative to being, engaging.
Yes, if you just say, I take the train to work, that's a fact. But it lacks nuance. It lacks the personality that fluent speech has.
This is where we bring in the technical term.
Adverbs of frequency. These small words, they add such crucial color.
They're small, they're subtle, but they are absolutely crucial to sounding natural and communicating that your routine isn't always exactly the same.
We're focusing on usually, which just means most of the time.
Okay, so why is usually so powerful?
By using usually, you're building flexibility into your speech. You're signaling to your listener, this is my default, but, exceptions exist.
Right. So if you say, I usually take the train, you're hinting that if the trains are having a bad day.
You might have another plan. Maybe you'll drive or take a bus. It's like a linguistic disclaimer. It's very natural.
And we can bring in sometimes and always to describe the full range of how often we do something.
Right. Let's look at the spectrum. Think about it in percentages. If you do something 100% of the time, no exceptions, you use always. I always leave home exactly at 7:30 a.m.
Wow, that's specific.
Well, some people are. Now, if you do the action maybe 70 to 90% of the time, you use usually. I usually check the traffic report before I leave.
And if it's less frequent, say, 30% of the time?
Then you use sometimes. I sometimes walk the last 5 blocks if the weather's nice.
Okay, let's quickly drill some examples of placing those adverbs correctly. Because the placement is really important for fluency, and I know we're going to hit this again later.
Excellent idea. Just remember, for most verbs, the adverb goes before the main verb.
So I always read on the bus.
Perfect. Or she usually listens to music.
We sometimes drive together.
They always complain about the traffic.
Always. He usually bikes in the summer.
See? It flows naturally.
So marrying the mode of transport, the frequency, and the duration, that creates the complete flowing sentence. The sources had a great example that brings it all together.
Which was?
I take the bus to work every day. It usually takes me about 30 minutes.
That sentence structure is excellent. It gives 3 key facts very clearly. But let's push this further. We need to move beyond just the logistics, the bus, the time.
Then into the feeling.
Exactly.
Yep.
We need to introduce you to the concept of using personal feelings as conversational hooks. This is what stops the conversation from dying after 30 minutes.
That is the key to making conversation authentic. It shifts from objective facts to your subjective experience.
We need to talk about the why of the commute.
Mm-hmm.
Do you use the time to relax,
Mm-hmm.
to work, to decompress?
Or to get stressed out.
Or to get stressed out, yes. So you can enrich that simple description by adding a feeling or an activity. Instead of just saying, I take the train.
You add, I love listening to music on the train because it's a time to relax.
Perfect. Or, I find the bike ride incredibly therapeutic.
Ooh, therapeutic. That's a good word.
It is. It opens up the dialogue immediately.
Yeah.
If I hear you say, I love listening to music, my natural follow-up is, oh, what kind of music helps you unwind?
And if you describe the bike ride as therapeutic, which is, like you said, a great, slightly advanced word for relaxing, I might ask, do you take a scenic route, or is it just the exercise that helps?
And that's how we move from just stating facts to having a real engaging conversation. Think of the commute description as the foundation.
And the feelings and activities are the first floor of the building.
That's a great way to put it. By combining the routine, the mode, the frequency word like usually, and the feeling, you build this compelling natural picture of your daily experience.
And you invite the listener deeper into your world.
That's what it's all about.
And that depth is what makes for a memorable exchange. You've moved from just trading information to, sharing a bit of human experience.
And let's just quickly recap the pronunciation for this section. Make sure you're confidently saying, commute transive jixis.
Right, shinjiz.
And practice the sentence stress in that key duration phrase. It takes me about 40 minutes. You want to put the emphasis on the verb takes and the number 40. It makes it sound instantly more natural.
It takes me about 40 minutes. Got it. Okay, but let's be real. Nobody's commute is perfect.
Not at all.
And honestly, the most spirited and fun conversations about commuting are usually about the bad stuff. The stress, the delays, the chaos.
This is the vocabulary of friction. It's the language we use to complain, which, as we know, is a very important part of natural conversation.
Ah, yes it is.
And the undisputed champion of all commute stress, the phrase that just defines the problem, is rush hour.
Ah, rush hour, pronounced it.
Exactly. Notice that clear stress on the first part of both words. Rush hour.
It's a phrase that's guaranteed to make anyone who deals with daily traffic just shudder a little bit.
It precisely defines that period of peak travel. The sources are clear on this. It's the high-volume times in the morning, usually 7 a.m. to 9 a.m.
And the evening, say 4 p.m. to 6 p.m.
Right, when everyone is traveling to or from work or school at the same time. If you can use rush hour correctly, you instantly sound more fluent because it's so deeply ingrained in how we talk about modern travel.
And it works as a great modifier too, right? Like a rush hour train.
A rush hour train, the rush hour traffic, perfect.
And what happens during rush hour, especially on public transport, things get crowded.
Crowded is our primary word for this.
Yeah.
It's a solid, reliable, descriptive adjective. It means containing a lot of people. You can use it for trains, buses, streets, stations.
A restaurant, anything.
But for a deep dive audience like you, we need to introduce the more intense, informal, and frankly more descriptive synonyms that really get the feeling across.
Ah, the words that paint a more vivid picture of discomfort. I like it.
Exactly. And we're focusing here on packed or full.
Okay, what's the difference between crowded and packed?
Well, when a train or bus is described as packed, it implies a much higher level of intensity than just crowded. It means people are standing shoulder to shoulder, maybe even physically touching.
You can't move.
You can't move freely. It's an intensity word, and it often implies, mild suffering.
I often hear the phrase standing room only used in this context too, especially if you miss the chance to get a seat. That phrase really communicates the density.
That's an excellent, slightly more advanced conversational phrase. And if we want to get really colloquial, especially in British English, you might hear chock-a-block.
Chock-a-block. I like that one.
It means completely jammed full. But, for your core vocabulary, stick with packed and crowded.
Okay, let's put this stress vocabulary into a sentence using the frequency adverbs we learned earlier. This example from the sources is just spot on.
Let's hear it.
The train is always packed during rush hour.
That sentence is perfect. It shows how a frequency adverb always works with the stress word packed. It conveys a consistent, miserable experience.
It sets a whole mood for the listener.
It does. And again, pay attention to the natural sentence stress. The train is always packed during rush hour. The words that carry the main emotional load get the emphasis.
Now let's tackle the vehicle headache. The vocabulary of road delays for drivers.
Okay, if you're driving, the source gives us two essential terms: traffic jam and heavy traffic.
What's the difference there?
Heavy traffic is the general term. It just means there are a lot of cars and they're moving slowly, maybe 20 miles per hour, something like that.
Okay, annoying, but you're still moving.
You're still moving. A traffic jam, however, is usually more severe. It implies the traffic has stopped completely, or it's just crawling at a snail's pace.
Often because of an accident or construction.
Right. A traffic jam is truly frustrating because you are static. You're not going anywhere.
I've heard people use the term bumper-to-bumper traffic to describe that state of total gridlock. It's so descriptive.
It is. It implies the front of one car is nearly touching the back bumper of the car in front. That's another great intermediate phrase.
But what's the most practical, conversational way to express this frustration? The phrase that defines your personal experience of it.
You mean the one that signals total helplessness?
Exactly that one.
That phrase is, I was stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
Now let's get technical for a second for our Deep Dive listeners. The grammatical structure here is a use of the passive voice.
With the verb to be and the past participle stuck.
Precisely. By using this structure, you show that the slow road conditions were acting upon you. They trapped you. You are the victim of the traffic.
That is such a key insight. The grammar itself conveys the sense of being unable to escape. It's fantastic. It implies this external force was controlling your movement.
And we can use similar phrases to amplify that. You might say, I was delayed by an accident, or the roads were gridlocked. But stuck in traffic is really the workhorse phrase.
What about for anxious drivers?
Well, they might describe their drive as white-knuckling it.
Meaning they're gripping the steering wheel so tightly their knuckles turn white.
Exactly. Maybe because of rain or ice or just aggressive driving around them. The imagery is fantastic.
It is. If you tell someone, I usually drive to work, but today I was stuck in traffic for an hour, I was totally white-knuckling it, that immediately sets up this short, dramatic story.
And that's exactly what we want our listeners to be able to do. That transition from describing the routine to explaining an exceptional negative event is the hallmark of a successful conversation.
And it moves us perfectly into our next section, the skill of storytelling.
Let's do it.
Okay, so we've covered the routine, which is present tense. Now we need to handle the daily curveballs, the unexpected things that turn a regular commute into a story.
And this requires a very sharp narrative shift. We have to move consistently into the simple past tense.
We're no longer describing what usually happens.
We are sharing a specific, finished anecdote from the past.
This transition is so crucial for advancing fluency. When we share a story, we're talking about actions that started and finished in the past.
Which means consistently using the simple past tense forms of the key verbs, especially the ones that define the problem.
Like, was late, or missed the bus.
Or the action you took the shortcut.
Okay, let's focus on the most common commuter story, being late. If the public transport was slow, we use the simple past tense of to be.
So, my bus was late. And if you, the passenger, were late because of that, you also use the past tense of to be.
I was late for my meeting this morning.
Exactly. And this requires some careful differentiation. Remember, late describes a state of being, a condition. You are late or you were late.
But there's a common pitfall here when we talk about finishing the journey. We need to focus on the right verb for reaching a destination.
Yes, the sources highlighted a very common and critical learner mistake. So many speakers, because they're translating from their native language, might say something like, I come late to work.
I hear that a lot, and it's not quite right.
The correct and standard verb in English for reaching your final destination is arrived. We have to contrast that common mistake with the precise usage. Arrives late or arrived on time.
So arrived signifies the action of finishing the journey.
He does. So if the event is completed, we use the past tense form. I arrived at the office at 9:15 a.m. It's an action verb. It defines the moment you stepped into the building.
Okay, let's analyze the structure of a complete natural story example. I like how you framed it. The cause leading to the effect.
So the cause is the past tense delay, and the effect is the past tense arrival.
The example is excellent for you to replicate. Yesterday, my bus was late. That's the cause. So I arrived. That's the action. At work 10 minutes late.
Notice the precision there.
Yeah.
Was describes the state of the bus, and arrived describes the action you completed. That structure is grammatically perfect, and you can easily replicate it for any delay story.
What about positive arrival?
Ah, yes. We should briefly touch on that. We use the phrase arrived on time. This indicates you reached your destination exactly at the scheduled moment or by the deadline.
Despite the heavy traffic, I still arrived on time for my presentation.
Perfect.
Okay, now to make the story really engaging, to make the listener lean in, we need some dynamic action phrases. Expressions that show what you did or what happened to you.
These phrases inject movement and a bit of drama. The sources provide some fantastic practical expressions that will instantly elevate your storytelling.
Let's hear them.
First, the core failure. I missed the bus train. This clearly means you failed to catch your transport. You ran to the stop, you watched it pull away.
You missed it. Maybe you woke up late or just didn't run fast enough.
Second, we reinforce that crucial delay phrase, but now it's firmly in a past tense story. I was stuck in traffic. This is the perfect shorthand. It saves you from explaining the whole traffic situation.
And third,
My favorite, because it shows initiative. I took the shortcut.
this implies agency, problem solving.
Exactly. It means you chose a faster alternative way to travel. Maybe you went through some back streets or cut through the park to save some time.
A shortcut story is always a great conversational twist. It suggests you had some control over the chaos.
It does. You can say, the traffic was absolutely terrible, so I decided to take the shortcut down Maple Street. And honestly, I saved 15 minutes.
We can also add some more dramatic phrases that come up in these stories, can't we?
Oh, absolutely. For example, if you were desperately trying to catch the train, you might say, I had to sprint to the platform.
Or, to be really dramatic, I was running for my life.
Yes. Or if you witnessed something on the road, you could say, the driver slammed on the brakes. Or, I overheard someone arguing about the delay.
All of those verbs, sprint, slam over here, are dynamic past tense actions that just add so much flavor to your story.
And that is the critical takeaway for this section. Fluency means being able to switch tenses flawlessly.
Right. Commuting is about routine, so that's present tense.
But the conversation is enriched by instantly moving into anecdotes, which is past tense. By using verbs like was, missed, took, sprinted, and arrived, you're showing advanced control over English narrative structure.
And speaking as a learner myself, I know that when I started using those strong active verbs instead of just saying it was bad, my conversations became so much more interesting.
It's worth the effort to memorize them.
It really is. Okay, we've covered routine vocabulary and storytelling verbs. This next section is absolutely vital for polishing your language.
Because even small errors can really disrupt fluency.
They can. The source material wisely addresses 3 specific recurring grammatical pitfalls that learners often fall into. This is where we turn good English into natural English.
And by correcting these specific errors and understanding the why behind them, you can significantly improve your overall command of the language. We're going to spend some real time here.
Okay. Let's dive into grammatical pitfall #1, the missing preposition. This involves a tiny 2-letter word too, but leaving it out is a huge structural mistake.
The mistake is saying something like, I go work by bus.
Or I walk school every day.
Right. The word work or school is being incorrectly treated as an adverb of location instead of what it is, which is a destination.
And the clear, non-negotiable correction is fundamental.
Always use go to plus place when you're referring to a destination. The preposition to is essential because it shows direction. Go needs a destination, and to gives it that link.
If you remove to, the sentence structure just kind of collapses, even if people can guess what you mean.
It does. And this simple rule applies to almost all destinations.
For example, I go to the office by train.
She goes to school early.
We go to the gym after work.
They go to the city center every weekend.
I need to go to the bank.
This simple correction, just remembering that to, is a hallmark of a learner who is really moving towards proficiency. It shows you understand how English handles movement and location.
Okay, but let's address the most common exception, because this is where a curious listener is going to get stuck.
Ah, yes. You're talking about home.
I am. We often hear people say, I'm going home, without the to. That's a great example of a nuance that trips people up. Why is home the exception?
Home often functions as an adverb of location in English. While you can say, I'm going to my house or I'm going to my apartment, when you use the word home, the to is almost always dropped in standard conversational English.
So it's just one of those beautiful little anomalies of the language.
It is. So you go to work, but you go home.
Perfect. That clarity helps. Okay, moving on to grammatical pitfall #2. Tense confusion with late.
This happens a lot. It often occurs when a speaker is thinking about a past event, but defaults to the present tense form of to be.
Why do they do that?
I think it's because they're feeling the current consequence of being late.
Ah, so the common mistake looks like this. I'm late for work yesterday.
The technical problem there is the temporal clash. The word yesterday clearly anchors the event in the completed past.
But I am, is present tense. The 2 parts of the sentence are fighting each other.
They're contradicting each other. So the clear correction is to recognize that late is an adjective. It describes a state of being. And we need the correct past tense form of to be to match the past time marker.
We must use I was late for work yesterday. The feeling might be present. Your boss is still angry. But the event of being late is finished.
You have to respect the past time marker. Yesterday, last week, an hour ago, this morning. That time marker demands the past tense form.
Which was for singular subjects like I, he, she, it.
Or were for plural subjects like we, they, and you. Let's drill this with some examples, making sure we practice both.
Okay. Singular first. I was late this morning.
The train was late yesterday.
Now plural. We were late to the meeting.
You were late last Tuesday.
My colleagues were late too.
So if you're ever correcting your speaking, look at the time phrase first. If it's today, use am or is. If it's yesterday or last Tuesday, you have to use was or were.
Simple, but absolutely critical for telling a coherent story.
Finally, let's revisit grammatical pitfall, #3. Misusing frequency words. We introduced them in section 1.
Always, usually, sometimes.
Right. But now we need to focus on their precise position in the sentence. Their placement is incredibly subtle, but it defines natural English flow.
Get it wrong and it instantly sounds a bit foreign.
It does. So we have 2 primary rules for natural placement. The first one, which we touched on, applies to all verbs except to be. And the rule is?
These adverbs of frequency usually go before the main verb.
Exactly. Let's drill this rule quickly with the verb drive.
I usually drive when it rains. That's correct.
She sometimes drives with the podcast on. Also correct.
But it would be incorrect to say, I drive usually when it rains.
That's the one that sounds clunky. Now, for the major exception, which is often the source of confusion, when the main verb in the sentence is to be.
So am, is, are, was, were.
When you're using the verb to be, the frequency adverb goes after it.
This is counterintuitive for some learners, but it's vital for sounding natural.
It is. Let's drill this specific rule.
Okay. The train is always crowded.
I am usually tired after my long drive.
He is sometimes late.
My bike is never clean.
The roads are always better on Sundays.
So the golden rule of adverb placement for commuters is before the main action verb, but after the verb to be. Mastering this seemingly small distinction is a huge step toward sounding truly fluent.
These three potholes, the missing to, the wrong tense with "ly," and the misplacement of "usually," are proof that sometimes the smallest things cause the biggest problems.
They are. But now, armed with these corrections and these examples, you, our listener, can bypass them entirely.
Okay. We've loaded up on vocabulary from rush hour to stuck in traffic. We've corrected the grammar. We've learned the narrative structure. Now it's time to activate all this knowledge.
Right. Time to practice using it in a realistic, sustained conversation. Language is for connecting, not just, reciting facts in a vacuum.
We need to structure a real-life dialogue about the commute, remembering that the goal is not a single question and a single answer.
It's a dynamic, sustained exchange that uses the entire toolbox we've built. And it all starts with the core icebreaker exchange that the source materials model.
The initial question is the simplest, most direct invitation. How do you usually get to work?
This immediately prompts the other person to use that present tense routine template we talked about. I usually take the mode to work.
And the crucial conversational follow-up is to immediately bring in the feeling and stress vocabulary we established earlier.
Exactly. You ask, do you like your commute, or is it stressful? This opens the door to either a pleasant routine or a stressful story.
That second question is where the real deep dive into the conversation begins. If someone answers, it's stressful, that's your cue, as a good conversational partner, to use the specific vocabulary we learned.
And show that you're actively listening. For example, if someone says they take the train and that it's stressful, you can immediately respond with a targeted follow-up.
Connecting the vocabulary, right?
Right. You'd ask, oh, really? Is the train always packed during rush hour?
Or, if they say they drive, you ask, do you get stuck in traffic often? Do you ever find a shortcut to avoid the jams?
This shows fluency because you are using specialized vocabulary and showing active interest in what they're saying.
The strategic use of follow-up questions is just so critical for fluency. It keeps the discussion going.
It turns the conversation into a dynamic tool for communication, not just a verbal quiz.
We should also talk about why these relatable, everyday situations, traffic jams, rain delays, serve as such great conversational icebreakers, even with someone you barely know.
They're universal experiences. They generate instant empathy. When you talk about being stuck in traffic, the other person has almost certainly been there too.
It's a shared misery.
It is, or a shared routine. It makes the conversation less transactional and immediately more personal and engaging. It's very low-risk bonding.
That's so true. Complaining about the commute is almost a social ritual in many workplaces. It's an easy, safe way to bond with a colleague without needing to know about their job or personal life.
And the source material reminds us that because you are talking about daily, real-life events, the English you use is grounded in your immediate reality.
Commuting may seem boring, but it's full of chances to practice describing routines with the present tense.
And current feelings. And those sudden small events in the past tense.
Let's simulate a sustained exchange just to show how the tenses and vocabulary all play together.
Okay. Imagine listener A, that's you at home, says, I usually take the bus to work. It takes me 40 minutes, and I always listen to an audiobook. That's the routine, all present tense.
Listener B responds, 40 minutes sounds long. Is it crowded?
Listener A, it's not usually packed, but yesterday was awful. The bus was 10 minutes late. Past tense to be.
So I missed my connection, past tense miss.
And I arrived, past tense arrived, late for my first meeting.
Yeah.
And now you're in storytelling mode, all past tense.
Listener B, dealing with unexpected delays is the worst. Do you ever take a shortcut if you drive, or are you just stuck with the bus route? And there's the follow-up using our vocabulary.
See how easily that moved from a description of a habit into a quick, relatable story using the past tense verbs and stress vocabulary.
That whole structure question, routine, complication, past tense story, and then a targeted follow-up ensures that you're actively using all the elements we've discussed.
Every time you share a specific detail, like exactly how late your bus was or what shortcut you took, you are practicing complex grammar and fluency in a really meaningful, applied way. And the application is what matters most.
That brings us to the end of our deep dive into the daily journey. What a massive amount of practical, high-value English we've uncovered in this seemingly mundane topic.
This information is absolutely ready for immediate use.
It is. Let's do a quick, enthusiastic recap of the key takeaways.
Okay, starting with the essential vocabulary. We reinforce the core terms you need to describe both the chaos and the movement.
Commute, your regular journey.
Rush hour, the busiest time.
Crowded, or even better, packed, full of people.
Heavy traffic, and that great dynamic phrase, stuck in traffic.
And don't forget the storytelling tools for a specific bad day, moving from the present routine to the past story.
Missed the bus.
Arrived late.
And the problem-solving phrase, took the shortcut. These are natural, ready-to-use expressions.
On the grammatical side, we tackled those crucial potholes which are so essential for polishing your fluency. First,
Always remember that directional preposition. Go to work or go to school. Never skip that too.
except for the special case of home.
Except for home.
Second, always check your time marker when talking about lateness. If it's a past event, you have to use the past tense form of to be.
I was late yesterday.
Don't let your present stress confuse your past grammar. It's a great way to put it.
And finally,
Practice the precise placement of those adverbs of frequency. They go before the main verb, like I usually walk, but they go after the verb to be, like the bus is always late.
getting those small words right is the final satisfying polish on your fluency.
This entire deep dive just reinforces our core belief. Small, daily, relatable conversations are the true key to unlocking fluency.
Talking about your commute in English every single day, even if it's just a couple of sentences, builds that linguistic muscle memory faster than almost any textbook.
Absolutely. Language learning should be fun, and it should reflect your real life. The commute is real life, and it's a constant source of conversational material.
So we'll leave you with one final thought, a specific challenge to put this knowledge immediately into practice. Don't just go through your routine tomorrow, observe it actively. Your challenge is to not just describe how you commute the routine using the present tense. We want you to find one new, detailed story about your commute every week.
Something funny, annoying, or unusual that requires a beginning, a middle, and an end.
And deliberately share it with a language partner, a colleague, or even just record yourself saying it out loud.
Practice using that simple past tense consistently in that story. Practice those dynamic expressions and turn that mundane daily trip into a source of compelling conversation.
Turn the observer into the storyteller.
Use the journey to capture the story, that active application of both present and past tenses, using your full vocabulary.
That is how you bridge the gap between knowing English and truly speaking English.
Go out there, observe your traffic jams, dodge the crowded spaces, and tell a great story. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Keep speaking English, everyone.